all Scripture is given by inspiration of God and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness.
Okay. He appealed to 2 Timothy 3:16. Okay. Let me show you the holes in the narrative. Okay. All Scripture is inspired by God and profitable for teaching, for reproof, for correction, and for training in righteousness, that the man of God may be complete, equipped for every good work. First problem. Okay. How do you know what the Scripture is? You can't appeal to the infallibility of Scripture without first knowing the Scripture. And how do you know what the Scripture is? First problem. When you say all Scripture is inspired by God, what constitutes the Scripture? What is all Scripture, and how do you know? Where did you get your knowledge of what the Scripture is? And how do you know these books are those that God inspired, no more, no less? This is what we call begging the question, circular reasoning. He's already assumed the canon in order to make his argument. No. You do not assume the canon. You need to first demonstrate the canon. My question or a comfort would be, how do you know what the Scripture is? Where did you get the knowledge of the canon? How do you know it's your 66 Protestant canonical books? That it's your Protestant canon of 66 books. How do you know that? Where'd you get that information from? So this is circular reasoning. You cannot tell me Scripture is infallible if you don't know the contents of Scripture. Okay, so you got that first point. Secondly, if you're going to appeal to history, that only makes the problem harder for you. Why? If you appeal to the Jews before, during, and at the time of Christ, which Jews? The Sadducees only accepted 5 books, the 5 books of Moses, like the Samaritans. Okay? The Essenes, those who produced the Dead Sea Scrolls, right, where we now found the oldest surviving copies of the Old Testament books in Hebrew with other writings in Hebrew and Aramaic. The Essenes not only had the books that we hold in common of the Old Testament, with the exception of Esther. Are you aware that they have yet to find a copy of Esther in the Dead Sea Scrolls? Now, I'm going to shock you with some information that may be new to you. Okay, but I need you to listen. Are you aware that in the Essenes scrolls, they found copies of Tobit, Hebrew, Aramaic, Sirach, and the letter of Jeremiah? They had a larger canon. Moreover, are you aware they also had the Book of Watchers, which is the first section of Enoch? So, Ray Comfort, are you going with their canon? If so, where's your letter of Jeremiah? Where is your Tobit? Where is your Sirach? It's not in your Protestant canon. So do we go with the Essenes? Or do you want to go with the Septuagint? The Greek versions of the Old Testament, in which we find the deuterocanonical books, 1st, 2nd Maccabees, right? Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, and so on and so forth. Should we go with that? Moreover, if you go with the Essenes, all discoveries thus far have failed to furnish even a copy of the book of Esther. Are you aware that at the time of Christ, the Jews that represented Pharisaic Judaism, the Pharisaic Jews, had to debate and argue over the canonicity of 5 books? During the time of Christ, Pharisaic Judaism, right? The Jews whose beliefs are found in Pharisaic Judaism, the Pharisees, unlike the Sadducees, they questioned and debated over the canonicity of 5 Old Testament books. They question whether Hebrew Esther should be in the canon. They question whether Proverbs should be in the canon. They question whether Song of Solomon should be in the canon. They question whether Ecclesiastes should be in the canon and whether Ezekiel should be in the canon. These 5 books were being debated whether they should accept them or reject them. Do you know that? So what is called Palestinian Jewry, Palestinian Judaism, these 5 books were being debated among the Jews, their scholars, whether they should include them or not. When's the last time a Protestant told you this? They questioned Proverbs because of chapter 26, verses 4 and 5, where if you read 26, 4 and 5, it seems to contradict itself. Because in Proverbs 26, verse 4, it says, do not answer a fool according to his foolishness, lest you become like him. But then in verse 5, it says, answer a fool according to his foolishness, lest he becomes wise in his own mind. Hebrew Esther was questioned because the word God and the word Yahweh does not appear a single time in Hebrew Esther. Do you know that? In Hebrew Esther, not talking about the Greek version of Esther, the Hebrew version of Esther, the name God is not used a single time, nor is the name Yahweh used a single time. There is no reference to God or Yahweh in Hebrew Esther. Do you know that? And because of that, the Jews question whether it should be in the canon. You guys who've been reading the Protestant Bible, you guys who have had in your Protestant Bible the English translation of the Hebrew text of Esther, have you never read it to see the word God or Yahweh never appears a single time? It doesn't appear a single time. And because of that, Palestinian Judaism, Pharisaic Judaism, question whether they should accept it or reject it. Song of Solomon, they thought it was too erotic because it's about a man, Solomon, and his wife, and how they romanticize one another and arouse one another for sex. And they thought it was too erotic to be in the Bible. Ecclesiastes, a book of doom and gloom. Why Ezekiel? Because Ezekiel's description of the temple and the sacrificial system does not perfectly comport with the law of Moses. And if you don't agree with the law of Moses, that's sacrilegious. So these 5 books had to fight their way into your canon. So which Jews do you turn to?